There's a strange moment that happens to a lot of people. You get the promotion. The bigger paycheck finally hits your bank account. The number you used to dream about when you were younger suddenly becomes real. And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, life feels different. You order food without checking the price first. You stop panicking every time your card gets declined. You walk through stores feeling like maybe you finally made it. But then something strange starts happening. The feeling disappears. Not all at once. Quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. And before long, you're making more money than you ever imagined, while somehow feeling almost exactly the same. Still stressed, still anxious, still waiting for the moment life finally feels secure. Because the truth is, for most people, salary growth doesn't create freedom. It creates adaptation. And adaptation is one of the most dangerous psychological traps in modern life. Especially now, because modern society has quietly built an economy around convincing you that every increase in income should immediately become an increase in lifestyle. The bigger apartment, the nicer car, the upgraded phone, the expensive gym membership, the better neighborhood, the vacations you suddenly deserve. At first, it feels harmless. You tell yourself you worked hard for it, and honestly, you did. But the scary part is that your expenses rarely rise in giant dramatic moments. They rise through tiny upgrades that slowly become permanent. An extra subscription here, a food delivery habit there, a slightly more expensive apartment because it's closer to work. Better clothes because everyone around you dresses better now. And eventually, your new lifestyle stops feeling luxurious. It starts feeling necessary. That's the trap, because humans are incredibly good at adapting to improvement. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, but in real life, it feels more like emotional inflation. Your brain normalizes almost everything surprisingly fast. The apartment you once thought rich people lived in becomes pretty normal. The salary you once thought would solve your problems becomes not enough. The life you once fantasized about becomes your baseline. And once something becomes your baseline, losing it becomes terrifying. That's when money stops feeling exciting and starts feeling heavy. A lot of people think higher income reduces stress. But for many people, it simply changes the type of stress they experience. When you're broke, you worry about survival. When you earn more, you start worrying about maintaining the machine you built around your income. Now the expensive apartment has to be paid every month. The car payment becomes permanent. Your social circle quietly changes. Your expectations change. Your identity changes. And suddenly your salary no longer feels like freedom. It feels like infrastructure, a system that constantly needs fuel. That's why so many high earners secretly feel trapped. From the outside, their life looks successful. But internally, they feel like they're running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. Because every new financial level creates a new version of normal. And modern culture makes this even worse. Especially social media. For most of human history, people compared themselves to maybe a few hundred people around them. Now you compare your life to millions. You open your phone and instantly see someone younger making more money, someone traveling more, someone buying a bigger house, someone retiring early, someone turning side hustles into millions. Even if your life objectively improves, comparison destroys the emotional feeling of progress. Because wealth today is no longer just survival. It's status. And status has no finish line. There's always another level. That's why someone making $40,000 dreams about making $100,000, while someone making $100,000 dreams about making $250,000, while someone making $250,000 feels behind people making millions. The target keeps moving, not because your needs changed dramatically, but because your perception changed. And perception controls almost everything. There's another reason this trap feels so powerful. Most people were taught to chase income, not freedom. Those sound similar, but they create completely different lives. Income is how much money you make. Freedom is how much control you have over your time, stress, attention, and future. A person making less money with low expenses and high flexibility can feel dramatically richer than someone earning triple their salary while trapped inside an exhausting lifestyle. But modern work culture rarely teaches that. Instead, it teaches escalation. Expensive version of the same psychological cycle. Bigger bills, bigger expectations, bigger fear of failure. That's why some people become more anxious after becoming successful. They aren't protecting survival anymore. They're protecting identity. And identity is emotionally expensive. Once your lifestyle becomes tied to your self-worth, every financial threat starts feeling personal. Now losing money doesn't just feel inconvenient. It feels humiliating. That creates a hidden psychological prison that a lot of people never talk about. The golden handcuffs. A life that looks successful from the outside but feels impossible to escape internally. You see this constantly in large cities. People earning impressive salaries while feeling completely financially suffocated. luxury apartments, expensive restaurants, constant work stress, endless commuting no real free time. And the strangest part is that many of them are living the exact life they once dreamed about. But dreams feel different once they become maintenance. That's the part nobody explains when you're younger. Your dream life eventually turns into responsibilities. The car becomes insurance payments. The apartment becomes rent anxiety. The high-paying job becomes permanent pressure. Eventually, you stop chasing happiness and start protecting stability. That's why burnout has become so common among ambitious people. A lot of them aren't actually chasing more joy anymore. They're chasing relief. Relief from pressure. Relief from exhaustion. Relief from financial fragility disguised as success. Because high income without emotional control can still feel unstable. And instability creates fear, especially when your lifestyle depends on continuing to perform at a high level forever. That's why many people secretly fantasize about simpler lives. Not because they hate success, but because simplicity feels psychologically lighter. There's a reason people romanticize cabins in the woods, slow mornings, quiet cafes, tiny homes, and disconnected lifestyles. Modern ambition often creates overstimulation disguised as achievement. You buy things to save time, then work more to afford the things. You upgrade your lifestyle, then lose the freedom you originally wanted. And eventually, you realize something uncomfortable. A higher salary does not automatically create a richer life. Sometimes it just creates a more expensive one. Real wealth feels different than most people expect. Real wealth is not constantly checking your bank account before sleeping. Real wealth is not feeling trapped in a job you hate because your expenses are too high. Real wealth is not needing to impress strangers online to validate your life. Real wealth is peace. And peace is becoming extremely rare, especially in a world constantly engineered to make you feel behind. That's why some millionaires still feel poor. Not financially poor, emotionally poor. Because there's a difference between possessing wealth and feeling wealthy. One is mathematical, the other is psychological, and psychology usually wins. If your brain constantly adapts upward, no amount of income ever fully satisfies you. There will always be another level, another benchmark, another upgrade, another person doing better, which means the real solution is not simply earning more. It's learning where the cycle ends. And that's difficult because modern culture rewards visible success far more than internal balance. Nobody applauds moderation online. Nobody goes viral for saying, "I actually have enough." But maybe that sentence is more powerful than we realize. Because at some point, constantly increasing your lifestyle creates diminishing emotional returns. The first time you double your income changes your life. The fifth luxury upgrade barely changes your happiness at all, but it absolutely increases maintenance. And maintenance quietly consumes people. Financially, mentally, emotionally. That's why some of the happiest people aren't necessarily the highest earners. They're often the people who successfully reduce the gap between what they earn and what they need to feel fulfilled. That gap matters more than most people think. Because freedom often comes from lowering psychological dependency, not endlessly increasing consumption. And this changes the entire definition of wealth. Suddenly, wealth is no longer, how expensive is your life? It becomes, how little pressure controls your decisions. That's a completely different game. And ironically, many people spend years chasing money only to eventually realize they were actually chasing emotional safety the entire time. Safety, breathing room, control over their mornings, freedom from panic, freedom from constant pressure. Not just numbers. Because numbers alone are strangely bad at creating emotional satisfaction once basic needs are met. That's why people hit career milestones and still feel empty afterward. They expected a permanent emotional transformation. Instead, the brain adapted. Again. And that adaptation loop never fully stops. Unless you consciously interrupt it. Unless you define enough for yourself before the world defines it for you. Because if you don't, modern culture will happily keep raising the target forever. More money, more status, more upgrades, more optimization, more comparison, more pressure, endlessly. And one day you wake up realizing your entire life became maintenance for a lifestyle that never actually made you feel secure. That realization is painful, but it can also be freeing. Because once you understand the trap, you start seeing money differently. You stop viewing salary increases as emotional salvation and start viewing them as tools. Tools that can either buy freedom or accidentally destroy it, depending on how consciously you build your life around them. And maybe the most dangerous part of all of this is how invisible the process feels while it's happening. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to build a stressful life on purpose. It happens gradually. A slightly better apartment because you're tired of feeling behind on a more expensive car because everyone at work upgraded theirs. More convenience purchases because you're exhausted all the time now. more subscriptions, more silent financial commitments attached to your identity. And eventually, your future income becomes pre-spent before you even earn it. That's when raises stop feeling exciting. Because deep down, you already know the extra money is mentally allocated somewhere else. The system expands instantly to absorb it, almost like your lifestyle developed gravity. And the higher your income climbs, the stronger that gravity can become, especially in cities built entirely around status signaling. You can see it in corporate towers late at night. Thousands of people sitting under artificial light long after sunset, telling themselves this level of sacrifice is temporary. But temporary has a strange habit of becoming permanent. One promotion turns into another. One financial goal turns into 3 more. One expensive habit becomes your new baseline lifestyle. And slowly, people stop asking, "Am I happy?" They start asking, "How do I maintain all of this?" That subtle shift changes everything psychologically, because maintenance mode is emotionally exhausting. Human beings are not designed to constantly operate under invisible pressure every waking hour. But modern ambition normalizes it. Being stressed becomes proof you're important. Being overworked becomes proof you're valuable. Being unavailable becomes proof you're successful. And the scary part is that many people don't even realize how anxious they've become until they finally stop moving. That's why vacations sometimes feel emotionally strange to high performers. They remove the distraction. Without meetings, notifications, deadlines, and financial momentum constantly stimulating the brain, people suddenly confront a feeling they've been outrunning for years. Emptiness. Not because their life has no value, but because constant ambition can slowly disconnect people from the original reason they wanted success in the first place. A lot of people wanted wealth because they imagined freedom. Freedom to rest. Freedom to explore life. Freedom to spend time with people they love. Freedom to wake up without panic sitting in their chest. But somewhere along the way, the pursuit itself became the lifestyle. And once ambition becomes your identity, slowing down starts feeling dangerous, even if you're exhausted. That's why some people become addicted to chasing the next level. Not because the next level truly changes their happiness, but because striving temporarily distracts them from emotional uncertainty. There's always another target to focus on. Another salary goal, another investment milestone, another luxury experience, another version of success that promises, this time you'll finally feel complete. But completion never fully arrives when your internal standards keep moving upward. That's why external success without internal stability can feel strangely hollow. And you can actually see this pattern everywhere once you notice it. The executive checking emails at dinner, the exhausted entrepreneur unable to relax on vacation, the corporate employee making 6 figures while secretly feeling trapped every Monday morning. From the outside, these lives often look aspirational. But internally, many people are operating under constant low-level anxiety. Because modern financial pressure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. Silent pressure to maintain appearances, silent pressure to keep producing, silent pressure to stay competitive, silent pressure to avoid falling backward. And fear of going backward is one of the strongest psychological forces in human behavior. Once people adapt to a certain lifestyle, losing it can feel emotionally catastrophic, even if they're still objectively doing well. That's why wealth can paradoxically increase fear. Not fear of starvation, fear of regression, fear of losing status, fear of disappointing people, fear of no longer feeling successful. And ironically, this can trap people in careers and lifestyles they no longer even enjoy. Because the higher your fixed lifestyle becomes, the less flexibility you psychologically feel. The golden cage gets bigger, but it's still a cage. That's why truly wealthy people often prioritize optionality more than appearances. Optionality to say no, optionality to leave toxic environments, optionality to rest, optionality to control their own time. Because eventually, many people realize time feels more luxurious than consumption. A peaceful morning starts feeling more valuable than another expensive purchase. A calm mind starts feeling more valuable than status signaling. And freedom from constant pressure starts feeling more luxurious than luxury itself. That realization usually arrives later than people expect. Often after years of overwork. Often after burnout. Often after finally achieving goals they thought would permanently transform their emotional state. Only to discover the transformation never fully came. Because the uncomfortable truth is that money solves many practical problems, but it does not automatically solve psychological ones. And sometimes modern culture confuses those two things completely. People assume financial growth and emotional fulfillment naturally rise together, but they don't always. Sometimes they move in opposite directions. Sometimes people sacrifice peace in order to afford lifestyles designed to look peaceful online. And that contradiction quietly defines modern adulthood for millions of people. working endlessly to maintain an image of freedom while privately feeling overwhelmed. That's why the richest looking life is not always the richest feeling life. The strange irony is that the people who often feel richest are not always the people earning the most. They're the people whose lives still belong to them. The people who can breathe, who can sleep peacefully, who are not constantly performing success for other people, who are not trapped by lifestyles they secretly resent. Because at the end of the day, feeling wealthy is deeply connected to feeling free. And freedom has far more to do with psychology than income alone. That's the part nobody tells you when you first start chasing bigger salaries. The number itself was never the final destination. You just hoped the number would finally make you feel safe. But real safety doesn't come from endlessly increasing your lifestyle. It comes from finally realizing that enough and peace are often connected. And in a world constantly trying to convince you to want more, that realization might actually be one of the rarest forms of wealth left. Maybe that's the biggest lie modern society ever sold us. We're taught that feeling rich is something waiting for us somewhere in the future. One more raise, one more promotion, one more upgrade, one more achievement. But for most people, that finish line keeps moving. The moment we reach one goal, a new expectation appears. The salary grows, but so do the expenses. The lifestyle improves, but so does the pressure. The opportunities increase, but so do the responsibilities. And eventually, many people realize they weren't chasing wealth. They were chasing a feeling of security, a feeling of freedom, a feeling that everything would finally be enough. The irony is that those feelings rarely come from earning more. They come from needing less, from becoming intentional, from deciding what actually matters before the world decides for you. Because real wealth isn't measured by how much money flows into your bank account. It's measured by how much control you have over your time, your attention, your choices, and your life. And once you understand that, the race stops feeling mandatory. For the first time, you can choose your own finish line. And maybe that's the real goal. Not to spend your entire life proving that you're successful, but to build a life that already feels valuable while you're living it. Because in the end, the people who feel the richest aren't always the ones who earn the most. They're often the ones who finally learned when enough is enough.